The Arizona Cardinals hired Mike LaFleur this past Sunday. Who is Mike LaFleur? It's time for a LaFleur lowdown, if I may. Let's discuss.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Clancy here. Thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast platform. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So I mentioned this. It's deep dive time on Mike LaFleur. You know that he's the Arizona Cardinals head coach. You know that he called plays for himself with the Jets years ago. You know that he hasn't done that since. What else do you know? Probably not as much as this guy that I'm about to bring on. John Butchko, host of Locked On Jets, joins me here to talk all things Mike LaFleur. What's up, dude? How's it going?
It's good, Alex. I think the last couple times I've been on Locked On Cardinals, it was the Aaron Rodgers era and the Adam Gase era for the Jets, so it's nice to be here under happier circumstances.
Yeah, for sure. And listen, going into this, let's just get right into it. So for me, I knew the Cardinals weren't going to be at the top of anybody's list. Okay, even down to the last stretch. Of course, you looking, to the West Coast from, you had your look from all the way on the East Coast. It's like Mike LaFleur and the Cardinals both didn't really want each other. They both wanted the head coach or the Raiders job, respectively, and then neither of those things happened. So now it seems like a arranged marriage for two people who need what the other person has. Talk to me about overarching themes of Mike LaFleur when he was in your backyard for those couple years.
It's difficult to pin things down exactly. The reason I say that is one of the themes you notice with people who leave the Jets is frequently they do so after an unsuccessful tenure, but it's not always clear how much they're to blame for it because the Jets are kind of a dysfunctional franchise from the top, as I think most NFL fans know. Now, I think like the natural thing whenever their team brings in someone who failed with the Jets for fans to say is, well, he was with the Jets, nobody could succeed there. And there are situations where that's more fair than others, like with Robert Saleh and the Tennessee Titans. Lots of people are saying, well, he had never had a shot with the Jets and, he wasn't really to blame for the Jets' dysfunction. And what I'd say about Saleh is that it was dumb for the Jets to fire him 5 games into the season. But for me, the mistake was not firing him the year before because there were lots of things Saleh did that just were responsible, at least partially responsible for the way the Jets failed while he was the head coach. I think with LaFleur, the offense was not good those 2 years. Statistically, they were at the bottom of the league. I never got the sense that he was really the problem, though. Those were the 2 Zach Wilson seasons. And, I do think that LaFleur probably has some blame for the Jets drafting Zach Wilson because, Robert Saleh was the defensive head coach. So I'd imagine that, you never know with the Jets because they're so dysfunctional. But you would imagine that the offensive coordinator had to sign off when you're drafting a quarterback second overall. So I think you can blame LaFleur from that standpoint. But the one thing I'd say is that if you look at the game Zach Wilson did not play, the offense looked pretty good, and the numbers back that up. I mean, he does run an offense that if you have a quarterback who knows what he's doing, you can have success.
See, that's the fascinating part, John, is like everything you said about dysfunction and, with Cliff Kingsbury, that was the last real offensive pop this team had. Drew Petzing had his moments, especially when they had an actual rush attack. But I think people in the Valley, fans, and I guess media members at this point, alike are like, this team needs a spark, and we thought it was going to be the defense last year. They were giving up 19 points per game through the first 5 weeks, even though they were 2-3. And then everything kind of fell downhill when Kyler Murray got hurt. And, it's been a dumpster fire since. With Mike LaFleur, for me, what I've looked at is his time in San Francisco. I think it was 2018. George Kittle he broke the record for receiving yards for a tight end, and Garrett Williams won Rookie of the Year when he was there. So there are things that happened under his watch that would lend me to think if he had substance and more say, you could exacerbate that in a good way. Did you see that from the, I guess, smaller sample size from when he was there?
I think,
or no, feel free to disagree with me.
I think that there were good things and bad things. I thought his playbook was very well designed. I thought that there were moments where situationally his play calling left something to be desired. And this is the Jets actually just went through something similar with their offensive coordinator from 2025, Tanner Engstrand. I was saying a lot of the same things where I think a lot of his plays were really well designed. I don't know that he at that point had the play calling, the feel for play calling. It's one thing to have a well designed play. It's, do you know the right time to use it? I think
Yeah.
that's an area where he struggled. But he was pretty creative. I will say in 2021, the Jets had pretty much no talent. I don't think I've ever seen a coordinator more creatively use laterals than the Jets did that season. It felt like every week he had some play designed up on third down where they throw it short of the sticks and the receiver, you have a receiver lateral it to a guy running forward to get a first down. So, I think his Jets tenure showed some good things and some bad things. Now, I think the real question is, what has he learned the last 3 years working under Sean McVay? Because if you look historically, I know it's kind of like a running joke in the NFL that, if you had lunch with Sean McVay, you're going to be a head coach.
You're a genius. Yeah.
Right. But if you look at the McVay tree for the offensive guys he's placed in head coaching jobs, they've usually been pretty good. And I'm a big believer that you can grow as a coach. And I'm a big believer that some coaches train you better than others. I mean, it's, without being in the Rams locker room on a day-to-day basis, it's difficult to say like how much any of these coaches has learned. But I think there's circumstantial evidence to show that McVay is a really good teacher, a guy who doesn't just develop players, but a guy who develops good offensive coaches. So, as much as like the Jets era, like shows, I think the Jets era you saw like LaFleur is kind of like what I'd compare him to, like a raw talent, a guy with like a lot of tools, but hadn't really put it together yet. So I think like the question, this was something I was really interested in, like watching LaFleur when he went to the Rams, because my guess was that he would get a head coaching job because of the McVay tie, that after he was the offensive coordinator of the Rams, the next job he'd have would be a head coach. I'm interested to see like how much McVay taught him and how much he can apply to running his own team.
Yeah, I mean, it's like through osmosis at this point. It doesn't even matter. It's like you just got to be around him, and then the cells will align, and then you'll be the next Wunderkind. I mean, Liam Cohen showed it, which was the difference. He went to Tampa Bay, blew the roof off, got Baker paid, and then, went on and did his thing. Like I said this entire cycle, like there's going to be a Liam Cohen somewhere. We just don't know who it is yet. And Mike LaFleur very well could be it. It very well could be Clint Kubiak. Who knows? The biggest thing for me, before we go into the potential red flags, we'll pull the curtain back. And if you think he'll make a good head coach, hypothetically speaking at this point, player development, talent development. Marvin Harrison Jr. Like Trey McBride's going to be great. Okay, he's going to be an all-pro or fringe all-pro for the next 5, 7, 8 years, you'd hope. Michael Wilson showed you give him a chance, the dude can ball. Marv is the big question mark, okay? He was close to another Ohio State standout wide receiver, different skill set, different player. Garrett Wilson, in my opinion, is superior to Marvin Harrison Jr. in pretty much every way. He's just that guy. He's Justin Jefferson who never got a shot yet. And for me, did you see that growth almost right away with Garrett Wilson and Mike LaFleur by his side? Or was it kind of like Garrett Wilson can just juke out 5 dudes in a row and make anybody look good?
I'll tell you what I said in 2022. I was very high on the Jets drafting Garrett Wilson because I felt like he was a plug and play guy. He entered the league. He knew how to run routes. Like you said, I mean, his change of direction ability is unreal. I don't know how much credit I would give to LaFleur on that front. And we'll probably get into it in a little bit. I do think that player development was not great with the Jets on the offensive side of the ball during that period. And the guys who succeeded tended to be veterans, and the exceptions were young guys who entered the league with a pretty well-defined skill set like Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall. So I don't know how much of that's on LaFleur and how much of it is just the guys the Jets drafted didn't go on to do anything. I mean, look, it's not like the young guys who failed with the Jets during LaFleur's tenure went on and had big success elsewhere, with maybe one exception, and that was only for a year in Mekhi Becton. But I can't sit here and tell you that LaFleur was a guy who did a fantastic job developing young players, because part of the reason the Jets failed during that tenure was just young guys did not develop. If the Jets were better at developing young players on the offensive side of the ball, LaFleur probably would have gotten a head coaching job straight from the Jets.
Yeah, and listen, it's not all doom and gloom. Like, I can thank you for the complete brutal honesty. Like, that was the biggest thing for me going to this, is like, you got to find a dude who can develop talent. I don't care what side of the ball it is. You got to find a guy who can just do it, because that's what head coaches, that's their chief goal. That's their chief thing, is to make their roster better and win football games. So, John, we're going to talk about potential red flags. If you think he'd make a good head coach, I know you said that the writing was on the wall after going with McVay. We'll talk about that next. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by a product that I use and have used for years in Gusto. Let's be real. No one starts a business for the joy of calculating tax withholdings or managing spreadsheets for their payroll, and that's where Gusto comes in. To take the stress out of payroll, benefits, and HR so you can focus on running your business and supporting your team. Gusto is the all-in-one remote-friendly payroll and HR platform that makes managing your team simple, transparent, and fast. Whether you're hiring, onboarding, or paying employees, Gusto helps you do it all in one place without the hassle of hidden fees. Unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, which means no surprise charges at the end of the month. That's huge. Knowing you can reach certified HR experts anytime gives you the real peace of mind that you need. Try Gusto today at gusto.com/LockedOnNFL and get 3 months free with your first payroll run. That's right, 3 months free, gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. One more time, that's gusto.com/LockedOnNFL. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Bink. So FanDuel, one last call for football. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, man. FanDuel's making sure you're right in the middle of the action with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. Whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everybody's been waiting for, and this is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's a perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets. If you win, make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. John Butchko, host of Locked On Jets, joins me here. Had an intimate look at Mike LaFleur a handful of years ago, the last time and the only time we've seen him call plays on his own, irrespective of the functionality of the organization. When you say dysfunction, my ears perk up. Obviously, every day we talk on our respective shows, you're looking for some positive amid the dysfunction. And this is all Cardinals fans have been waiting for, is some name to pin head coach go. And you hope for the best, offensive side of the ball, Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. For me, John, I'm nervous. The fear of the unknown is not something that I like to be in, but you hope to pivot to the excitement of the unknown. With that said, outside of scheme, developing talent, is there anything where it's like, this guy, this could debilitate his ability to be a good head coach or not? Like, is there too small of a sample size to even make any sort of determination that way yet?
I'll tell you one thing that was an issue during LaFleur's 2-year tenure with the Jets is there were lots of communication issues with younger players. It seemed to me like he did a better job with veteran guys, but there were lots of rumblings that like young players were kind of unhappy with the way he coached them. I mean, it was true of a wide receiver they drafted, Denzel Mims. It was true of a wide receiver, Elijah Moore, both those guys were drafted in the second round. There were also issues. Mekhi Becton was critical of LaFleur at various points. Now, this was something I talked about a lot on Locked On Jets in 2022. I'll say with hindsight, I'm not sure how much I pin on LaFleur, because if you do look at the young guys who failed in that era with the Jets, Denzel Mims never really amounted to anything.
Right.
Elijah Moore hasn't really amounted to anything. Mekhi Becton had like 1 year last year, in 2024, where he was like the 5th best guy on a great offensive line in Philadelphia, went to the Chargers and wasn't that good this year. So in hindsight, I actually don't know how much of that I put on LaFleur. And the big elephant in the room with Mike LaFleur is that Zach Wilson was his quarterback for the 2 years he was in New York. And you can blame the play caller. Look, Jets fans did at the time. I did not come away thinking that Zach Wilson's failure to develop was LaFleur's fault. Alex, covering the Jets as I do, I feel like I have a PhD in bad quarterback play. And what I'll say is that when I look back at Zach Wilson and I look back at his early years, I just saw a guy who was not close to being ready to play in the NFL. And there's a quarterback who's going to be playing in the game this Sunday, Sam Darnold. I could not get over, and this was as it was happening, I could not get over the way the Jets were mishandling Darnold's development. And in Darnold, you saw raw ability. in Darnold's first 2 seasons, and this is when he had Jeremy Bates as his offensive coordinator year 1, and Jeremy Bates was a guy who had been out of football for years before Todd Bowles pulled him back onto his coaching staff. Jeremy Bates year 1, Adam Gase year 2. I mean, I think any NFL fan knows the quality of Adam Gase. Despite that, Sam Darnold's talent shined through, and he had 7 games in the first 2 years with a passer rating of 100 plus. And to me, that's a big deal because it shows that there was talent there. And I always think that if you have talent, even if it doesn't shine through consistently, even if you're in a bad spot that kind of suppresses it, you'll eventually see it. Zach Wilson had 1 game of 100 passer rating his first two years. And there were plenty of reports that LaFleur in year 1 kind of like threw the full playbook at Zach Wilson to see like what he could handle. And he realized, you know what, we put too much on this kid. So year 2, they really scaled things back. They tried to come up with some core concepts that Zach was comfortable running, and they just couldn't find the mix. So to me, like LaFleur kind of tried everything, but I do think like you have to note that there were some issues, even though in hindsight, like I don't know like how much it really reflects negatively on LaFleur, given the way these guys' careers played out. There were communication issues with younger players. Now, again, was that his fault? I don't know, but it was something that kept popping up over and over.
Yeah, and it's probably tough with the first-time head coach also to kind of like police that stuff. Like everybody was new over there, so it's just like I think with the Cardinals, it's interesting the comparisons. With JG last year, with Nick Rallis and Drew Petzing, they were all first-timers. Obviously, Saleh and LaFleur had a little bit more experience in spots than Rallis and Petzing had, but I think the Cardinals' balanced mix of vets and young guys on this roster will yield dividends to make it easier for him to be a head coach now than even an OC back then. It's like Jonathan Gannon, this is what I said yesterday. Jonathan Gannon was the bridge between the dysfunctionality of Steve Keim in the last regime and whatever's next. He changed the culture. He changed everything. Now between the lines has to change, or Mike LaFleur is going to be out of a job in 3 years. But Mike LaFleur is coming into the most functional version of a dysfunctional organization that he's touched. If, irrationally speaking, that's rational. And you understand exactly what I'm talking about, where you find rationale in a dust storm.
And, one thing I would say is that I do feel like the Jets prepare you to deal with any situation that comes forward, because it never gets more ridiculous. You'll never deal with the situations more ridiculous than the ones that pop up with the Jets. And, I do think that like there's something to be said for like working in a job like that early in your career, where you have this incredibly intense media situation. You have a fan base that's very frustrated because the team can't win. And you have an owner who just on a good day doesn't know what he's doing. So no matter what happens with Mike LaFleur, I'd imagine like this is going to be an easier situation to navigate than the one he had in New York.
And that's should be just sugar on the tongue for all the, for all my watch. Like it's not just the Cardinals. It's half the teams in this league are closer to this than perfect. So it's just varying degrees of what you can handle and how you can not succumb to all the dysfunction. Now, before I get you out of here, from what you've seen and what you've seen up close and after, do you think Mike LaFleur could be a very good head coach in this league?
I'm going to be honest with you. I felt that LaFleur took too much of the blame for what happened during his time with New York, and we've kind of gone into that. I never like looked at him as a guy who I thought was going to be a great head coach, at least at that point in his career. But again, like I do think that there's something to the idea that these Sean McVay years may have been a game changer for him. I think like if I'm a Cardinals fan right now, that's what I'm pinning my hopes on is, he got the Jets job when he was, he was young, and yeah, you're right. He did work for Kyle Shanahan. He had some experience, but that was a long time ago. And I am a believer that coaches grow. We talk about players developing. I think coaches can develop. So would I have been terribly excited about this hire if it was made 3 years ago after LaFleur was coming off and whether or not it was his fault, he was coming off an unsuccessful tenure? I would be very skeptical. Now, I don't know what to make of it because, we haven't seen him call plays in 3 years. But if I was pinning my hopes on something, it would be that, the training Sean McVay gave him could make a big difference. Maybe he learned how to be a head coach in that time. So, I hate to like not give you an answer to your question, but I think that there's look, in fairness, I think this is a hire that raises a lot of questions. I think it could go well. I think it could go poorly. And I think that, the fact he's been kind of hidden the last couple of years adds some mystery to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And thanks for that insight. Like, I appreciate you being honest. Like, for me, in sales, companies will hire people who have a skill set but don't have any sales experience because they can mold them into what they want them to be. You want a tabula rasa much more sometimes than a guy who has 10 years experience and this is my ways and this is what I do with all the issues that come with it. I feel like as close to a clean blank slate that Mike LaFleur could have been going into 2023 is what he was. So if he was molded by the guy, coupled with Shanahan, staying away from maybe the mistakes he made with the Jets, it's like that could be the triumvirate of success for the Cardinals, where he got the perfect mix of good and bad. And we'll see. We'll see. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what he does building out the staff, but we're still very early on this. John, thank you so much for joining me. Tell people where they can find you.
Oh, Locked On Jets every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. If you want to hear more about Jets dysfunction, it's the place to go.
I will talk about everything that John discussed in the final segment. Be right back. This episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by BetterHelp. February can be a lot, man. Flowers, candy, stuffed animals, so much to talk about relationship-wise. And it can honestly feel like everyone else has it together in their love life. But here's the truth. Whether you're married, single, dating, or just focusing on you, most people still figuring out, exactly what they're doing. And no matter where you are in your romantic journey, therapy can help you find your way. It can help you get clear on what you want, what feels heavy, and how to take some pressure off yourself. It's easy to assume that everyone has the, quote, perfect relationship, but most people are working through something. Therapy can help you recognize patterns that might be weighing relationships down, and it can even help you communicate better, set healthier boundaries, and stop carrying everything alone. The biggest thing, it reminds you that you're not behind. You're right on time. BetterHelp is licensed therapists in the U.S., and they do the initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. And if you want to switch therapists, you can do that at any time. Sign up and get 10% off BetterHelp at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp.com/locked-on. Today's episode of Locked On Cardinals is also brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever just to hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress of guesswork. I said it right the first time. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the dang TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/lockedon to book your appointment today. Great stuff by John Butchko, host of Locked On Jets. He's TBD also. I appreciate the candid responses. It was a lot of mirroring to what we experienced with the coordinators for the Cardinals this year and last year with Drew Petzing. Maybe not so much. But Jonathan Gannon, Robert Saleh, Mike LaFleur, was it really Drew Petzing's fault, or they don't have a run game? Was it really Drew Petzing's fault, or what if Drew Petzing went to the lab of Dan Campbell, and Dan Campbell happened to be Sean McVay, and then 3 years later, he was a head coach? It's like, this is such an inexact science when it comes to first-time head coaches. What you don't want, which is what I say about all rookies and second-year players, is what you don't want is the oh-no moments. He's set to meet with the media in a couple hours for the introductory press conference. I feel like Jonathan Gannon's introductory press conference was yesterday. Is that weird? I feel like the last 3 years happened so fast. Is that weird? I feel like Michael Bidwell was just talking about casting a wide net before hiring Monty Osborne and Jonathan Gannon after firing Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury. Is that weird? It's weird. But there's a lot of unknown. The positives to take away was the offense wasn't bad without Zach Wilson when Zach Wilson was either hurt or another quarterback was starting. Garrett Wilson did shine when he was there, which is helpful. George Kittle shined in San Francisco when he was there, which helps because you got Trey McBride, you got Marv. And John was not hell-bent, but he was leaning towards the side of this could have just been a Jets thing. So if you take a very raw product in Mike LaFleur coming off his Shanahan time and his Jets time, going under the warm cocoon of Sean McVay for a couple years. This is the time where he would be ready to be a head coach, and that makes sense. There's still, and this is not supposed to be negative, this is not supposed to shy away from the positive, there is so much unknown about what he's going to be as a head coach. It's just true. It's just true. I mean, even with Liam Cohen going to Jacksonville, it's like you saw Tampa Bay's offense go banana sandwich last year or 2 years ago. Last year still, technically. You saw him go nuts. You haven't seen that with Mike LaFleur. You saw Clint Kubiak and the Seattle Seahawks offense go nuts this year. You haven't seen that with Mike LaFleur calling out himself. That's just factual. So the leadership element, I'm sure, will be there. The what not to do, player development-wise, that he learned when he was with the Jets and East Rutherford. He has that under his belt now, and he's got sandwiched surrounding that time the tutelage of Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. That's all we know. One thing is for certain. This offense needs to pop in 2026, regardless of who the quarterback is. Trust me, I will talk Kyler Murray later this week. I might even do a whole show. Next step, getting the right coordinators so Mike LaFleur can focus on calling the plays, running the team, having a defensive guy being the head coach of the defense so he and whoever the offensive coordinator is can usher in a new offense and hopefully at least score 30 points one time next year. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Remember, without you, there is no me. I'll talk to you tomorrow.